Hello, everybody, and welcome to Feeling Seen, the podcast that talks about the movies that make us feel seen. And my co-host for today is a comic that you might know from several disciplines, several different places. Perhaps you have seen her acting on shows like The Blacklist, For Life, or Bull. Maybe you know that she won the Boston Comedy Festival as well as the Ladies of Laughter competition. And maybe you've seen her new comedy album, A Very Particular Experience, racing up the charts on iTunes. You can be a part of the movement too. You can get in on that, you guys. Liz Glazer, expert at law, comic, professor, educator, giver and bringer of joy and laughter and contemplation, I suppose, because comedy is a nuanced art form. Welcome to the show. Is there anything else that people need to know about you before we get started?
I feel like that's the intro that my mother would be the happiest that you gave. So I just so appreciate it, Jordan. Yeah, good. I mean, you know, I'm not an expert. I can tell you that right off the bat, okay? I appreciate it. I'm certainly not going to deny it for the purpose of a credit, although I guess that's literally what I'm doing right now. But, like, sometimes people talk about imposter syndrome, right? Like, this is a thing, yeah? And I feel like the regular trope about imposter syndrome is this kind of like, yeah, but we all have it. So, like, you're not an imposter. Can I tell you? So I used to be a law professor. Now I do comedy. Yes. You know, classic, rude. Everybody does it. Every comedian.
Yeah. The
right?
traditional path.
Right. So, but in seriousness, like I don't feel like a fraud as a comedian. Not because I think I'm hilarious all the time, but because I know what I'm here for with doing it, right? Whereas I haven't taught law for, when was the last time I taught law last in 2015. And so it's 8 years ago that I even did anything in law, because I haven't done anything since that has anything to do with law. And other than do comedy at law schools or law firms, which isn't the same. Okay. It's terrific, by the way. And like, if anyone listening, I mean this seriously, because I didn't think I would love to do it as much as I do. Cause like corporate gigs, you know, generally comedians like don't love a corporate gig because it's like, you have to like sort of censor yourself or whatever it is.
It feels like one of those slippery slope things.
Right. Exactly. I cannot tell you how much I love to do law schools and law firms, because basically my North Star, I only started doing them during the pandemic because like literal friends of mine who I worked with in the law firm or who I taught with either at the same school or we knew each other from conferences or whatever it was, were like, hey, can you come on a Zoom and just like make our community less upset? And I was like, yeah, for sure. And I started it then, and I've done it, you know, into now. And let me tell you, like, they've been such a hit, which is like the most fun because it's such a great intersection of like the thing that's the most fun for me and the thing that's the most fun for the audience, like coming together in this beautiful, magical thing. And like my North Star for writing material for those communities is like, what was I too afraid to say when I was in the world, right?
That feels like it could be cathartic.
Yeah. And it's nothing earth-shattering. I was just like basically afraid that I was the only one who felt stupid, you know?
Sure.
Because I'm like, everybody else is so smart. And that's what I was starting to say with the imposter syndrome is like, now looking back, I had imposter syndrome when I was a lawyer and I had it when I was a law professor. And now I'm like many years going on a decade out and I'm like, oh yeah, I was right. I was an imposter. Like, not to say I didn't deserve the job. Like I graduated, I did whatever. Like, it's like with jobs that people get from you go to school, you get a degree, you take a test, whatever, that kind of thing, it makes sense that people would then have imposter syndrome, because what I feel I was most skilled at was swindling admissions officers, right?
That is such a skill.
Yeah.
That is such a skill. There are some people who are just great at fucking getting jobs.
And the thing is, I was one of them, and that doesn't mean that I didn't deserve to get into the school or to get the job or whatever it was, but it means that I was an imposter. And like,
sure. You were successfully running a con job.
Correct. Exactly. Yeah. And the thing, I'm like, the only thing that I wasn't a fraud at was being a fraud. I was a verified fraud. Okay? And so
you were the Anna Delvey of getting into law circumstances.
But I think you're right. Now I don't feel like a fraud. I don't have imposter syndrome, but it can be hard to believe in myself, right? Like, like I think I'm funny. I think I'm good at what I do. And also the extent to which I think in a creative field that one must believe in oneself is pretty intense because there's a lot of rejection and you can find it. Anybody can say something about you're in the public eye, right? And so when you're in that space, believing in yourself is this like premium. Like, and I see people, as I imagine you do, who it's like they believe in themselves in such a fashion that I'm like, that's guts. You know, like I see it.
I think this is why, and like we will get to the character in a moment, but I think going into comedy as a second career is such a smart move because entertainment generally, challenging career, lots of rejection, lots of hustle, lots of legwork. There is a specific kind of difficulty to comedy.
Yes.
I think there is a specific kind of difficulty to being, if you are not a cis man, going into comedy.
Sure.
There is a kind of like knock around part of the job of like, you know, taking your licks to get your way up the ladder that I feel like coming into comedy as second career when you have established yourself and like your confidence and who you are in another realm and then bringing it into comedy and sort of maybe being like, no, this is my second career. I didn't come here to get my ass kicked. If I wanted to do that, like, no, I learned those lessons a while ago. So I feel like there's a pragmatism to the circumstance of coming into comedy second.
I think that's true. And also, like, you know, I mean, I joke about, it's the classic route because it's weird and circuitous. I liked what I was doing in law. However, I had the chance to do comedy and I realized that, like, for me, it was a little closer to what I think I was after. Not necessarily in law, because I think in law, if I'm being real, the thing I was after was just like appeasing my parents and their anxiety.
That's very real,
Yeah, because my parents are descended from Holocaust survivors on both sides, like 4 out of 4 grandparents. And so I think that, and I talk about this on the album, thank you for mentioning it, by the way, like that there's an inherited trauma that arises. I talk on the album about it in terms of a fear of everybody dying. But I think that another attendant fear that comes with it is a fear of like, you're not going to be okay. You have to have a profession and whatever.
Yeah.
And I don't, like, there's not a moment that I'm not grateful for the first career. Because first of all, I don't think I would have been buoyed financially or, as you're saying, in terms of my sense of self without that, you know, cutting my teeth in a different way in that first career. First of all, if I would have been a comic in my 20s, as opposed to a young lawyer or young law professor. I mean, my God, I was teaching in our night program when I was 27 years old, 137 night students who were like grown people, property law, which is like historically the most boring type of law, okay?
Wow,
and if you don't think that I mean, I learned so much about how to carry myself.
Yeah, you're like, I can do this room with my type 5 because I taught 137 night students property law.
Yeah, I mean,
Don't challenge me.
I feel that. Anyway, so I'm pretty young. At the time, I think I was like 11 years junior to the next oldest person on the faculty.
Okay.
So I was terrified for 100 million reasons, one of which was I was like, they're not going to take me seriously because I'm so young. And then after a class, one of these like, you know, older, very senior guys who I was on the faculty with comes over to me. He's like, Liz, what are you doing in there? It sounds like a comedy club. And I had no aspirations to comedy at that time at all.
Interesting.
And I was horrified because I'm like, oh my God, they're going to think that I'm not serious enough. I have to be less funny. Meanwhile, now, looking back on that story, I'm like, I wish I was taping my sets. Like, what the hell was I doing? Because these are big lecture halls. And if it was so loud that you could hear it in the hallway, right? What I wouldn't give for that kind of response now. But anyway, so it's not that I have anything negative to say or that I feel about my prior career. It just was like not exactly for me, right?
Yeah.
I just don't think that was like, I wasn't done kind of fully realizing myself, in just doing that. But anyway, so verified fraud is what I think.
Verified fraud.
Yeah.
But what you just said something, though, that I think is perfect segue into the meat of the discussion, which is you said, like, I wasn't done, like essentially becoming myself yet sort of situation. And the Wonder Years, the character that you brought for us to discuss today, is the star of that show, Kevin Arnold, as played by Fred Savage, of course. And that is a show about that exact sentiment. Like, it is a show about becoming oneself in the sort of, like, there are multiple points in our lives that are, like, sort of key formative eras. But, perhaps the rawest, most, like, nakedly unchecked among them is the set of teenage years that this takes place in. The Wonder Years tracks Kevin Arnold from the ages of 12 to 17, from 1968 to 1973, I believe. And Kevin Arnold is the character that you have brought because you felt seen by this character.
1968. I was 12 years old. A lot happened that year. Denny McLean won 31 games. The Mod Squad hit the air, and I graduated from Hillcrest Elementary and entered junior high school. But we'll get to that.
So I gotta tell you, yes, I did feel seen by him, and also I felt seen by Kevin and by the kind of intersection of Fred Savage's performance and Daniel Stern's monologue because I misunderstood it. I'm watching it, I'm like 8 or 9. Okay.
So is this a real time watch? Like you're watching it as it airs?
Oh,
okay,
100%. I mean, so I'm 43. This comes out when I'm in like 3rd, 4th grade.
Wow.
And so he's a little older than me as the character, but like, he looked pretty little as a 12-year-old.
He did.
Yeah. I mean, it's hard, like, because I'm like, I can never know. I never know how old anybody is. Like, unless someone's a baby or 1,000. Like, the people who know, like, oh, well, that's a 17-month-old. I'm like, what kind of magic powers do you have? I have no, like, they don't carry ID. I have no clue how you know.
They don't have a SIM bubble that tells me.
Right. Like, I don't get it. But he's, he seemed like he looked young. But maybe not. I have no idea. Whatever. I sort of viewed him at the time as a peer, even though I was slightly younger, is my point. Yeah. And I was watching the show when it first came on, and I remember being like, oh my God, that's my brain. And what I mean specifically, so my first memory, ever in my whole life, I'm looking out the window. We lived in Fort Lee, New Jersey, in an apartment building on the 2nd floor, And, like, it was, like, the sun was setting. I was a pretty spaced out kid, like, very pensive, And I'm looking out. There's, like, a motel and a highway out the horizon from my parents' apartment building. And I'm just, like, doing, just sitting. And my mother is like, Elizabeth, what are you thinking about? And I said, Mommy, one day today will be a long time ago. And I was 4 years old at the time. Yeah, so she was pretty impressed. She's like, excuse me, I have to go call my sister and show off about the fact that you said that. But second of all, that mentality of this moment that I'm living now is going to be seen later. And a beautiful thing, by the way, is like now where I live, which is also in New Jersey. That was in Fort Lee, New Jersey. I now live in Essex County. That's Bergen County, whatever. But sometimes when I go into the city, I actually pass that, not just the apartment building. It's Midwest. If anybody is like so Fort Lee that like you want to know.
So Fort Lee.
Right. But so my route sometimes to the city to do stand up for the night for shows happens to be not just passing the apartment, but like what would be the view of right there. Wow. Yeah. So, and I think about it, of course, every single time because I'm like, wow, it's a really great thing. Because,
I was right. Like one day that will have been, this will be a long time ago. Right. And that, oh my God, that was a long time ago.
It was a long time ago. And I think in addition, I mean, just the passage of time alone is an accomplishment. I mean, my album itself is about
good point.
Yeah, like it's literally about a stillbirth that my wife and I experienced, and so I don't take for granted.
I'm so sorry.
It's okay. Thank you. But it's about the album is about grief and stillbirth and pregnancy loss and things like that. And it's funny. I 100% promise that it's funny. And it's also like I really, because of the gravity, not only of the material like in its topic, but in its happening to me and my wife. Like I really wanted to make sure that it was not only a good comedy album, but also that I said something that was like complete and like weighty enough to merit the creation of this in order to honor that, you know, and the memory of our daughter, Leo Pearl. But in any event, so the passage of time alone is an accomplishment. In light of, you know, some people don't get to experience the passage of time.
Absolutely.
And also, you know, there are moments like I live my life and a lot of it is like, okay, I get to go into the city from New Jersey to do comedy shows. And sometimes the comedy shows are great comedy shows, but sometimes it's like, okay, I'm going to do a set kind of in the middle of nowhere, maybe 3 people, maybe I'll make $7. And it can be a little hard in those moments to be grateful. Okay?
Yeah.
Like legitimately grateful.
To be happy to be here.
Right. And that moment, like I'm always grateful for the route taking me that way because then I check myself and I'm just like, you know what? It's a long time ago and I'm living what I want to be living. So that's really something.
This resonates so much with sort of exactly the sort of frame of mind I've been in right now lately because like I'm like doing a career transition in my mid-late 30s.
I love that.
And I like never met a practical career I liked, going from journalism to filmmaking. Parents couldn't possibly be more confused.
Oh, I relate to that.
But like it is, I feel a sense of impatience with wanting to be where I want to be further, faster.
Yes.
But I generally like, I never really think about my age. I'm 38 and I never really think about it. It's fine with me. But like I've been really had cause to really consider like 38 and what that means to me recently. And even just a few days ago, I was having a conversation with a friend about how actually, upon like looking inward with it specifically, how grateful I am for 38.
Yeah.
Because like, besides like the job agita and like the economy such as it is, all those things. Yeah. Who I am and how much of myself I have learned how to be and how fully myself I have learned how to be, incorporating the lessons of the 38 years and really embracing them and wanting to be better and more of me all the time.
Totally.
I fucking love 38 because I just get to be better at doing this all of the time, which means I'm only going to keep getting better. And that just excited me so much to really sit with my age and be grateful, like you said. And that is such an amazing point of like, passage of time is a luxury. It is a gift. Not everyone gets that. And that is such a beautiful thing to point out.
Oh, thanks, Jordan. And I really, I watch now your life. I mean, we're just meeting now, but we're
just meeting.
I'm going to track you forever. Okay.
Great.
And no, with great interest and love, because I think that's, first of all, I do like you. And I am
I'm enjoying your company.
I am
Liz,
too.
Sincerely.
Truly and sincerely for me too. And also like, I think that's a super exciting moment. Also, I loved 38. I met my wife when I was 38. I'm trying to think what else happened during 38. But like, that was like a good time. You know, I really enjoyed it. But I misinterpreted. This is the reason I was saying this. I thought when I was watching Kevin's face, right? Like Fred Savage's face and then Daniel Stern's voiceover, I was like, oh my God, this is a story about a person who's living their life while understanding what the future of their life is, which it's not. But
that's a fascinating switcheroo.
Yeah. And so the way the show works is like much more standard than that. And the remake as well, which I wanted to make sure to watch the reboot, which I did for the purposes of this conversation. Because to be honest, I did not watch all of the Wonder Years. I dipped out at some point.
The thing I remember most about the Wonder Years that I watched was like the dinner table conversations with the Arnold family and like being like kind of put off by what a hard ass his dad is, but he's just like, you know, very archetypal like 60s, 70s dad.
When my father had a bad day at work, he'd just sit in the dark by himself and watch TV. We learned early on that this was a danger signal.
Damn it, Kevin. How many times I tell you not to leave your bicycle out in the driveway?
But
You think they grow on trees? If you don't want to take care of it, you don't have to have it.
But I was just gonna ride it over to Paul's later.
Well, now you're not going to ride it over to Paul's. You're going to put it away, and then you're going to go to your room. Now!
And then sometimes you knew you shouldn't do it, but you just couldn't help yourself.
Okay, get a grip on yourself.
You gave him lip.
What did you say?
I feel like it focuses less on those dinner table conversations as it goes on to like Kevin with like girlfriends.
Right,
and, like,
right.
But of course, I like so many have all carried a torch for Winnie Cooper my entire life, so it certainly stuck with me.
Yeah, totally. No, she was amazing.
Hi. What you doing? Nothing. Oh. When are you coming back to school? Monday? Oh. But maybe we could do something tomorrow. I mean, if you want. Yeah, I mean, sure. If you want.
Well, I think this is an interesting way into a character, like fixing to a Kevin Arnold, because like, and this gets to something I wanted to bring up, which is I have a friend who was obsessed with the Wonder Years growing up. One of my very best friends. Yeah, she loved the show, and she is one of my most wonderfully nostalgic friends that I have. Like every once in a while, she just goes on these nostalgia benders. She was the one in high school who listened to Bob Dylan and classic rock, and was a Led Zeppelin fan from like 12, and is still like she feels so kind of rooted in a time before she was alive. And I feel like the Wonder Years, like it's a show looking back. It came out like sort of, I think each year it came out was 20 years to the year from when the show takes place. Right. And so I wondered what is your relationship with nostalgia as somebody who does a lot of thinking about a life in you know, from a 30,000 foot view in terms of like the gift of the passage of time? Like, are you somebody who like keeps these snow globes? Like, do you keep a lot of these snow globes on yourself with these on your shelf with these self-contained memories? Do you fondly look back or contemplatively? Yeah, I do fondly look back on memories, but like when you're talking about your friend, I'm thinking of a friend of mine who is very nostalgic. Her name is Lissa Mandel. She's a wonderful performer, writer, comedian, and she used to have a show that sometimes comes back, but it's called The Bitch Seat. And in it, you would bring like an artifact from your childhood, and she would like give an artifact from her childhood. And like I loved doing the show, and I would love to do it if it ever comes back or whatever. But I don't know that I relate myself as like that level of nostalgia. And I think in this way, some of my misinterpretation of the Wonder Years is relevant because like, I mean, it's a gorgeous story, both the reboot and the original. In the reboot, Martin Luther King is shot and killed, assassinated in the pilot, whereas in the original, Brian Cooper, Winnie's older brother, who had been drafted and was like the coolest kid on the block, the only one who can get Wayne, Kevin's older brother, to stop beating him up, dies. And that he's killed in Vietnam. And he's killed in Vietnam. That's right. So he's drafted and then he dies at the end of the episode, which then leads Kevin to take a walk and into, you know, this woods area that's nearby. And then he kisses Winnie Cooper.
I went down to the big climbing tree in Harper's Woods. I didn't admit it to myself until years later, but in my mind was the shadow of a thought that Winnie might be there. She was sort of hugging herself. I didn't know what to say. I had the strangest feeling. It was impossible for me to believe that Brian was dead.
I'm sorry about Brian. And I'm sorry for what I said today. It wasn't true. I know.
I knew that it was about the past, but it was more like, okay, if this is the way that this kid whose life looks pretty much like mine, then I get to like understand how he understands his now time in the future. And I think I'm sort of also realizing this in real time, if I can be honest about that. Like, a lot of my childhood was nonsensical, and I could say to me, but I think in general. And I mean by that like my parents, so my parents were not Orthodox Jews. And the reason that that's relevant is that they sent me to Orthodox Jewish day school. Oh, and so there was this like, the reason they did it, according to them, was that my grandparents wanted to make sure that we, as the kids in our family, had this like strong sense of Jewish identity. And my parents were like, okay, well, the way to do that is to go to like these certain schools. And what I would learn later is that the Solomon Schechter, which is a conservative day school, at the time was having leaks in the classrooms. And so then the kids were like learning in the hallway, and these are private school tuitions. And my parents were like, we're not going to pay whatever to have her be in class in the hallway. So we'll go to the Orthodox one because they have not leaky classrooms.
Yeah.
So what that resulted in was me learning about like, oh, you have to be really kosher. You can't go out on Shabbat, and being like friends with all these like Orthodox kids. Meanwhile, I wasn't. Like, we would learn, oh, you can't eat non-kosher, you can't go out on Shabbos. Meanwhile, we're driving to Rudy's Pizza to get pepperoni on Friday night, literally.
Wow, okay.
And I remember like one Monday, my friend Shira, who's like still my best friend, like from first grade, she's like, hey, what'd you do this weekend? And I was like, went to the museum, ice skating, we went to a movie, and like all these, I'm 6. So I had like a whole itinerary, and she's like, you did all that on Sunday? And I was like, yep, I did. Because at that time I was like, I'm just a liar because I don't know.
You've been a tiny scammer your entire life.
It's true. Yeah. So it was like, I think that having this character who had their adult self being like, okay, this all works out, was calming to me. And I think that was my coping mechanism, because I'm like, right now, this feels like there's a lot of inner conflict, but I have to believe that this like gets resolved in order to go on, I think.
Yeah.
Like, I don't mean to suggest that that's like inner conflict, like there's tumult in it, right?
Sure.
Like, yeah.
But just like you're reconciling things. Like you're reconciling these like contrasting or conflicting elements. Where it's like, how do I square this? And will I ever?
Correct. And also, you were talking about the dad being like this angry guy. I actually took a lot of comfort in the personality of, what was his name? Jack Arnold.
Jack, yeah.
So my cat's name, actually. So anyway, true. I did not realize that until this moment. But anyway, the personality of that dad to me was so comforting, because my dad was like that, which is to say, because I feel like, at least at the time, I think, I still think it's a pretty nuanced character description. That actor is really great. Because
he's phenomenal.
He's so good because Dan Lauria.
Dan Lauria.
Yes, thank you,
Producer Marissa comes in with Dan Lauria.
I feel comfortable saying this, that like at the time, and maybe still, there were these ways that dads on TV were either like sitcom dads, which I'm like, my dad's not like that, or super scary on a drama dad. And I was like, my dad's not like that either. But that guy, Jack Arnold, I was like, that's my dad. okay?
Yeah.
Because Jack, he wasn't like, he was angry, but it came from love, and you could see it in the way that Dan Lauria played the character of Jack Arnold. And you could tell that he was just stressed out. You know, he wasn't like being mean because it was in his soul. He was just oh my God, how am I going to like, you know, work at this dumb job and support 3 kids in the suburbs of Chicago? It's stressful, you know? And like, I had a dad like that who was really trying to like make it all happen because, you know, we were a lot less wealthy than everybody at our school. You know, I went to school with really rich kids, you know, this one's the CEO of Revlon or, you know, like kind of that sort of thing. And
I would imagine like it's in like a New Jersey suburb, there's a lot of that like commuting to Manhattan spillover.
Yes, 100%. And I went to high school in the city. And so then it becomes like a Gossip Girl type of situation. Yeah. And we were not like that. You know what I mean? Yeah. So it was like this thing where my parents were always like just trying to keep it together, but they really wanted us to go to these schools. And then you go to the schools and like everybody's dressed in a way and we're, you know, kids and we want to dress like everybody else. Oh, the bat mitzvah, it's got to be a certain level or whatever.
Yep.
And it's like all this social pressure. And I feel terrible like looking back because like had I really known the way that I know now, I would have been like, okay, like just don't. Like, let's have it on Zoom or whatever. Like that didn't exist at the time. But, you know what I'm saying? So I really related because I don't think that I can think of, I'm not like a TV expert or for that matter, literally anything else, see above. However, I do feel comfortable saying that I think that depiction of a dad who was like kind of scary, but not scary like you were actually afraid that he was going to do something is really rare.
Yeah, he was scary in the sense of, like, you knew if you walked into that house, you'd say, Mr. Arnold.
Yeah.
Like, hi, Mr. Arnold. Yes. And he would be like, hi.
Right.
And if you called him Jack, it'd be like, what'd you say?
Right.
And like, yes, sorry, Mr. Arnold. Sorry, Mr. Arnold.
Yeah, I can just, like, see him, like, grunting, you know? Or just, like... Because I had friends that were sort of more chatty around my dad, and my dad was just like, what? Like, what is this person doing in my house? You know, like, just like, okay, you're annoying. Like, my dad, like, started at stressed out and annoyed, you know, like that. Yeah. And it wasn't, again, like, it wasn't because he was a bad guy. It was just because he was, like, tired and stressed in the way that people who are, like, middle to lower class trying to make it happen can be. Because it's stressful.
We're going to take a short break, and when we come back, more with Liz. Then I will have one quick thing before we go about a very me movie trailer that debuted this week. The movie is called Hidden Strike, so we're going to talk about that at the end of the show. Stick around.
You probably already have a favorite animal. Maybe it's a powerful apex predator like the tiger or a cute and cuddly panda. And those are great, but have you considered something a little more unconventional?
Could I perhaps interest you in the Greenland shark, which can live for nearly 400 years? Or maybe the jewel wasp, who performs brain surgery on cockroaches to control their minds?
On Just the Zoo of Us, we review animals by giving them ratings out of 10 in the categories of effectiveness, ingenuity, and aesthetics. Listen with friends and family of all ages to find your new favorite animal with Just the Zoo of Us on MaximumFun.org or wherever you get podcasts.
Since the dawn of time, man has dreamed of bringing life back from the dead. From Orpheus and Eurydice to Frankenstein's monster, resurrection has long been merely the stuff of myth, fiction, and fairy tale. Until now. Actually, we still can't bring people back from the dead. That would be crazy, but the Dead Pilot Society podcast has found a way to resurrect great dead comedy pilots from Hollywood's finest writers. Every month, Dead Pilot Society brings you a reading of a comedy pilot that was sold and developed but never produced, performed by the funniest actors from film and television. How does Dead Pilot Society achieve this miracle? The answer can only be found at MaximumFun.org.
Welcome back to Feeling Seen. I'm talking today with comedian Liz Glazer, who feels seen by the twofold character of both child and adult Kevin Arnold from the classic 1980s-1990s ABC show, The Wonder Years. Let's get back to our conversation. The feel of The Wonder Years is so specific.
Yeah.
And it's such a naturalistic show.
Yeah.
It really, it just unfolds. It's just a kind of constant slice of life with not necessarily bad guys. It's just people doing their best.
Totally.
And I was like, do we have coming of age TV like that anymore? I certainly don't know. Of everyone just doing their best, or does everyone have a superpower, or they have or they're on drugs and it's euphoria?
I hear
Wonder
that.
Years is the anti-euphoria.
I think that's right. And as I was rewatching it, I was like, I think the inciting incident is really nothing more than it's the first day of middle school. And it's the way that you learn how to write a pilot.
And it's not the first day of middle school, and that Kevin Arnold has to win a competition to get the girl or prove him. He just is going to school that day.
Just he's got to go. And the thing is that it's true to life in the sense that you think of, in how to write a television pilot, it's the inciting incident is a meteor, here's normal life, and then a meteor hits, and now we have the story, right? And the thing is that when you're 12 years old and you gotta go to a new school for middle school, that's a meteor. And
that's a meteor! That's a meteor!
Yeah. And living, it's a real credit in both versions to the acting of everybody on the show and the writing, obviously, but the acting in order to convey the gravity of a moment like that, and how big it felt.
I watched the epilogue, the very last scene, and how it kind of sends you off for the whole series, and it ends with the best 4th of July ever kind of situation, and Daniel Stern giving you the roadmap of sort of where everybody went. Mom, she did great in business, and Wayne took over Dad's furniture company. Yeah, and he is looking back on his life with this wizened reflection, in a way now that I would assume this is a 55-year-old guy looking back at his childhood. Yep. And but the timeline that it gives us is that he talks about how the next summer Winnie went off to study art history in Paris, and we wrote each other every week for 8 years. Yeah. And when she got back, I was there to meet her at the airport with my wife and my 8-month-old first child. Yeah. And I hear that, and when I was little, to me, that was so grown. Kevin was such an adult. That Kevin is probably maybe 25. Yeah. He has an 8-month-old. He's picking up his first great love from the airport. Yeah. And now, I'm thinking, 25? Yeah. I know 25-year-olds now showing up to the airport with their 8-month. That's crazy. And so then, it's... And about the age that Daniel Stern's son is the boy in the background voiceover that's hey, Dad, you want to play catch? Right. And his son is about 10 years old when that happens. So this is adult Kevin is early to mid 30s. Yeah. Looking back on his life like this. And when did you realize that life could start later for you than how fiction told you? Because I remember in high school, I was well, obviously by 24, I'm going to have 2 children, because 24 is it's it. I grew up in a small town in Oregon. And so when, you're somebody who's gone on to second career and been actually, this first thing wasn't what I wanted to do. Yeah. So did you have a break where you were holy shit, fiction made me think 25 was as old as it gets?
Yeah. Well, that's a really good question. And I think for me, there are a couple moments that occur. One is, so I'm gay, but like when I was in college, I had a boyfriend for 3.5 of the 4 years. Mm-hmm. And it was the kind of relationship that, like, first of all, it was like, I mean, it wasn't like a good, like, we fought all the time, but like it was sort of sitcom-y the way that we did. And so,
sure, okay.
He wasn't the right person in part because he was a guy. And I would then find that out when I kissed somebody else who was a woman and not a guy. And I was like, oh my God, this is like everything I never thought was possible, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
And I think that was a moment when I was like, life can start again, because I never, when I was dating my college boyfriend, it was sort of this thing where I was like, oh, I guess we'll get married, I guess. But I never had the vision of like, I guess I envisioned having kids, but I think that my vision was just like, kind of like me. Like I wanted a partner.
Yeah.
But I think because I had such gay shame when I was younger, that I don't think I allowed myself to fully imagine what I really wanted. Mm-hmm. And so having a vision of me, I think, was just safer than like imagining a wedding to someone. It was like, I wasn't like interested in like marrying a boy.
No, I know very specifically what you mean. I love very big and I love very deeply, and I consider myself having like a limitlessness to love in my life. But at the same time, there have been so few possibility models for what a happy ending in the sort of conventional sense looks like for someone like me.
Yeah.
So like I envision myself in terms of a future as surrounded by people, but the idea of thinking of myself in a future context with the person, my person, in the way that like straight people have like their person, and the way that even like gay married people have their person, like to be an ace individual and have love be, have that path be something that I'm kind of carving for myself because I don't really get to see how it works with others. Like it is me making something up when I consider myself as having that sort of future. It's being like, well, sure, I guess so, because it doesn't feel necessarily real.
Yeah.
It's me completely, like, headcanoning something. So I know what you mean of it just being, like, looking forward and seeing myself.
Yeah.
I know exactly what you mean by that.
Yeah, and thank you for validating that, because I think it is true. And I don't know that I've ever, like, put it that way. And the other moment that I think of is I remember when I was teaching law, and this must have been around 2012-ish. I wasn't in comedy. I wasn't even close, really, to being in comedy. But I was getting a bit disillusioned. And when I say that, I mean, I was like, you know, I used drugs and I'm sober now, but I wasn't then. And I wouldn't, like, go to work having, like, I wasn't, like, high at teaching. But it was just, I was living a life where I was like going to my job and then like smoking pot or drinking or whatever.
Yeah, it wasn't a relationship based just on fun. Yeah. There were other elements of your relationship with using substances.
Yeah, exactly.
That weren't necessarily sustainable reasons.
Yeah, totally. And it wasn't, I mean, and I like to say that it's not so much like a tamping down of the experience. I just like it's like the drug stories that sometimes people hear and tell that presumably are true related to being sober and getting sober, are like, oh, and then I was in a gutter and whatever. I don't really have that. I just had like a kind of mild like buzz very frequently, to a point that I don't think I knew exactly how I felt anymore.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so it was around a time when that was happening, and I had this research assistant who was a student in my law class, who was like, you kind of have a Lena Dunham vibe. Have you ever watched Girls? And I was like, no.
Okay.
And at the time, what would I have been? Whatever it was. It was like, yeah, that sounds right. So I was a little older than Hannah Horvath. Yeah. And I don't mean to bring up another character. But
oh, no, go for it.
But
please.
But I watched the show and I was like, oh my God, I totally know what this research assistant meant. And like, I watched that show, like studied it, and I couldn't even explain at the time why I was so interested in it, but it was almost like this lost stage of my 20s that I never had. And so like Hannah in the pilot, for, you know, just refreshing, Hannah's cut off by her parents in the pilot, monetarily, financially. Yeah. And so she, a writer, has to figure it out with this internship that she's not getting paid for, and like she has rent in the city, and you know, all of a sudden, so that's the big meteor inciting incident of that show. In her 20s, she's probably like 22-ish,
probably
or whatever.
Like 23, 22, she's
like
fresh
that.
out of college.
Right. And when I was fresh out of college, I was right in law school. And so I didn't have that stage that I was sort of on the precipice at the time that I watched Girls for the first time on the recommendation of this student about to embark on, right?
I know exactly what you mean, because I routinely say that like the frustration of now in my life is that I'm doing my early 20s and my late 30s and it's less cute now.
Totally. Yeah. So maybe it was Girls that ultimately led me to quit my job, but like, or to do stand up or whatever. I don't think exactly, but like, I watched that show so obsessively in what would be, you know, I guess the like year and a half leading up to when I did stand up for the first time. I think that watching someone whose main pursuit, as Hannah's is on the show Girls, is fully realizing her own expression of self. We watch her, you know, in all of her like plotzing all over her face. I love that show. I mean,
one of my most feeling seen moments in all of film or television is the very end of that show when Marnie is with Hannah. And she has the moment where she like, Hannah's going to have that baby.
Right.
And Marnie's like, we're going to raise this baby. And she looks at her and she's like, I'm your best friend. I win.
Yeah.
I love you the most. Like that insane monologue is me dialed up to my most delusional.
Yep.
And I absolutely love Marnie Michaels throughout that show. But in that moment, I was like, Marnie, me and you, I would not be this fucking narcissistic about what you're doing, but everything in me would want to do what you're doing. And I would just know how to control it.
It's, you know, I love whenever I'm in the middle of a rewatch of that show because I get to just feel like they're alive. And what a great thing to say about a show that's what you want, is you just want to believe, like be in it, in life with these fictional characters, you know. And Girls, I think probably is the only show that has ever been able to do that for me, like throughout the show. At the time, The Wonder Years did it, because The Wonder Years for me, I mean, that was a time when we were still on VHS. We were still on press, play, record, like run downstairs, you know, to the VCR TV, do it. And then, of course, after, you're like, oh, it taped like something else or whatever.
Yeah, and the bathroom breaks during the commercials. You run to the bathroom and make sure you get back in time.
Yeah, 100%. So it was all that. And I remember the episode of Paul's Bar Mitzvah, which was so exciting to me because I'm Jewish.
Yeah.
You know, I remember like wanting to see it so badly, and then something happened with the tape and I didn't get to watch it until reruns.
Yeah, oh my God.
Yeah, so that was really, I was so upset to miss Paul Pfeiffer's bar mitzvah. And
not Paul's bar mitzvah.
I know. It was, I mean, it's a really great episode. And like, you know, there are a lot of really great episodes of that show. And I think that you're right. It had such a naturalistic feel. It was such a work of art. Each episode, like just these, the colors that they use, and how I feel like it was always like that kind of sun setting on a suburban block sort of thing. And it's like so beautiful now that I literally live on a suburban block that, like, if it would be a block where the Wonder Years or a show like it would happen, that would work, because it's such that kind of block, which I feel so grateful for. And like, that's the scene that I'm looking out on.
Well, I love that we have bookended the conversation with two coming of age stories that are both like that are both like, there's a sort of hyperbole to girls, but in the sense of like kind of just in the way that like girls in their 20s are hyperbolic, like, because they're both very just like, they are both very naturalistic and they are both very slices of life. And I'm glad to have the continuity of that in art that has resonated with you, with formative characters.
I thought you were also going to say that we were bookending the conversation with me wistfully looking out a window.
Looking out a window at sunset.
Correct.
You know, in a house that could be any house, with a yard that could be any yard in America, on a street that could be any street.
Yes.
I remember a place, a town, a house, like a lot of houses. A yard like a lot of other yards. On a street like a lot of other streets. And the thing is, after all these years, I still look back with wonder.
I've come to the end of the time, and I feel bad about that because I've so enjoyed
this was
talking
delightful,
to you.
Jordan.
So much for
Thank
making the time.
you. Yeah, truly, this was really a huge pleasure.
Thank you again to my new friend, Liz Glazer. We hold each other in our hearts. We honor the passage of time. Her debut comedy album, A Very Particular Experience, is out now from Blonde Medicine. We will put a link to it in the show notes so you can go check it out. And now, that one quick thing before I go. The trailer for the movie, Hidden Strike, in which there is, it looks like a war for oil. 2 ex-special forces soldiers must escort a group of civilians along Baghdad's highway of death to the safety of the green zone. This looks like somebody in my replies on Twitter was like, I'm surprised they didn't call it Fury Highway, and that it was extremely well observed, because you watch this movie and it is absolutely this conceit plus Fury Road, guys. Like, the aesthetic of it looks like, the color palette, it looks like we are going hard on a George Miller Mad Max Fury Road tip. And great, I like that movie. I fucking love that movie. That's a modern masterpiece. Why not be inspired by that movie? Why not chase that dream? And John Cena, what a charming, huge man. Just popping up in Fast X to make it a children's movie every time he was on screen, having misadventures with Dom's son, and now we get Hidden Strike with him and Jackie Chan. And I think he is his sort of gigantic man oafishness, mixed with like pure beatdown abilities. That's a great foil for Jackie Chan in an action duo buddy heist special forces movie. I think this is a good pairing. I feel really optimistic about this chemistry. The special effects, frankly, look, I don't know, like, I don't know what's going on, but it's just like, it's quaint. This movie almost looks quaint. It looks like what gets me is it's being distributed by XYZ Films. XYZ Films makes like kick-ass legit genre cinema. This movie does look more, from the first looks, like a DTV spectacular, but we are getting XYZ Films brings you DTV looking spectacular with icon of a man Jackie Chan and mountain of a human John Cena. So I feel like we're really blending action movie interests of mine in this, and people are taking oil and people got to stop them from taking oil, and things are going to blow up and people are going to get thrown and tossed, and Jackie hopefully is not letting himself get really beat up as he has historically in his career doing his own stunts and everything, because he is not the youngest man anymore and he is forever vital, forever vital. We do not underestimate you, Jackie, but Jackie, we wish for you to take care of yourself. We love you. We love you. We want you around even longer. But yeah, big man, martial arts hero, bring them together, have them fuck people up, have them stop or start or achieve, I don't know, an oil heist. I don't know what side of this they're on. Frankly, it's immaterial to me. But yeah, Hidden Strike coming later this year. This sounds like fun, and I think we should all be down for fun at the movies. This and Barbie, you guys. Like, who knew this year would bring us such bounties as this? Yes, so this movie, the counterpart to Barbie, you heard it here first. And that's our show. You can follow us on Twitter at FeelingScenePod or send us an email at feelingscene@maximumfun.org. If you want to follow me, I'm JorCrew on Twitter, JORCRU. Our theme music is by Andrew Eben. The show is produced by Marissa Flaxbart. Our senior producers are Kevin Ferguson and Laura Swisher, and this is a production of Maximum Fun.
MaximumFun.org.
Comedy and culture.
Artist owned. Audience supported.